So we've taken 3 fairly sizable steps. Me coming in was like an 18-month transition of trying to figure out how to be an entrepreneur, how to own a company. And you know it from, when you formed your band and when we formed our band, we were playing shows together. That's the same mentality. You're doing everything. You're thinking of everything. There's booking shows, there's writing songs, there's practicing, there's driving to events, there's logistics for hotels, where you staying, and we're playing in Chicago. Like there's things like that I had to learn on the business side. I'm not a math guy, man. Like, I mean, you and I have been friends for like 20 years, right? Like we've never talked about math. I'm not a math guy. So I had to learn business finance and all these things that I'd never studied.
Welcome to Backstage Pass with the HR Rockstar, the show that pulls back the curtain and cranks up the volume on the most pressing HR topics, from talent strategies and workplace culture to career pivots and leadership. Because in today's world, HR isn't just behind the scenes, it's center stage. I'm your host, Jay Arnold, and in the world of HR and talent, there are times we recognize top performers within the workplace, sometimes referred to as rock stars. This podcast combines my love of HR as my career with my experience of 10 plus years performing shows around Michigan and the Midwest in my rock band, chasing the dream of being an actual rock star. Join me as I sit down with rock stars in their fields to have fun, insightful conversations that keep the human in human resources. Together we'll disrupt, innovate, and amplify the future of work. So grab your pass, turn it up, and let's make some noise. Joining me today is Frank Buscemi, CEO and Chief Creative Officer of the MBE Group, a global full-service marketing and communications firm with experience in the mobility, tech, and consumer goods sectors, where they serve high-growth small to medium businesses to multi-billion-dollar global enterprises. I first met Frank years ago in the Detroit music scene when our bands crossed paths. We found ourselves playing shows together and becoming fast friends. Years later, we still see each other at shows and are happy to stay in touch. Hey, Frank, welcome to the show. For those new to your work, can you start by giving listeners maybe a quick snapshot of your career path?
Yeah, it's great to be here. Good to see you, man, as always. Good to see you in a podcast setting, by the way. Yeah, my career path is pretty interesting in that, I started my career, when I went to college, I wanted to go into broadcasting or music. And when I ended up in classes, I decided to take up journalism, and I studied music as well at Grand Valley State. Started my career as a sports writer for the Oakland Press here in Michigan, and realized pretty quickly that trying to be a musician and cover sports happened at the same time, so it didn't work. And then back in 1996, I got offered a job at a PR firm called John Bailey and Associates. And I sort of fell into the marketing communications world from there. And I split my career between different agencies and multi-billion-dollar global companies where I ran global communications, or I was handling, regional public relations or event management and different things along those lines. So I moved, from some small startup agencies into very large. I used to work for a $16 billion German-based company and got to do a lot of international events and learned everything from starting as a journalist to becoming a PR practitioner to advertising to social media to now we're really heavy into AI. So it's really interesting to go in our world in communications. It's hard to stay at a job for your entire career. And about almost 9 years ago, I was working for a automotive supplier running global communications, and just got to a point where there was no next step. The company was going public, and I really didn't want to be part of that. And we had an agency on the aftermarket side, one of our divisions, and that was this agency. And I ended up buying into it back in 2016. And here we are.
Actually leads right to my next question is what led to striking out on your own with MBE, and can you walk us through it? You just shared a little bit about that. So that agency, you bought into it. So what exactly is MBE compared to the Marks Group and the evolution of that?
Yeah, it's an interesting story, right? Like when I bought into the company, it was called Marks Group, and the founder was Tom Marks, and he'd been with the company for probably 33, 34 years at that point. He bought that company from his mom in the 1980s, and I worked with them for probably at least 3 years on a few projects in the performance vehicle world. And the opportunity came up. I had gotten to the point where I was looking at other opportunities because the company I worked for was going public. And I cared about the work, not about spreadsheets and shareholder value and things like that. I cared about branding and marketing work and developing a brand and launching products and those sort of things. So I got together with Tom, and he needed a succession plan, and I kind of became the succession plan. So I bought into the company as Mark's Group. And then 2.5 years later, I ran into an old friend, Tom Eisbrenner, at an event up in Traverse City, Michigan. And his company was roughly the same size as Mark's Group and had been around as long. And they did mostly PR, B2B communications, some graphic design work, whereas Mark's Group did a lot of B2B, B2C communications in a different side of the auto industry. And we decided to merge the companies. So in 2019, it became MBE Group, which is Mark's Buscemi Eisbrenner Group. And then earlier this year, we acquired a company called Growth Machine out of Chicago. So we've taken 3 fairly sizable steps. Me coming in was like an 18-month transition of trying to figure out how to be an entrepreneur, how to own a company. And you know it from, when you formed your band and when we formed our band, we were playing shows together. That's the same mentality. You're doing everything. You're thinking of everything. There's booking shows, there's writing songs, there's practicing, there's driving to events, there's logistics for hotels, where you staying, and we're playing in Chicago. Like there's things like that I had to learn on the business side. I'm not a math guy, man. Like, I mean, you and I have been friends for like 20 years, right? Like we've never talked about math. I'm not a math guy. So I had to learn business finance and all these things that I'd never studied. I'd worked with global budgets and things and traveled all over the world, pricing out events and doing things like that. But doing day-to-day P&L work was totally new. And so we've taken 3 pretty major steps, and our intent is to double the size of the company in 3 years. And we're on that path right now.
Yeah, it's funny. The music business, the key word is the second word, is business. Whether it's sports business, music business, auto business, media business. So learning all those things, it literally is transferable. I remember when we called it a day, we became landlords a short time afterwards during the Great Recession, the housing crisis of 08, 09. And I remember our accountant we used said, Jay, it's the same thing. Instead of writing off guitar strings and amps and hotels for your band, now you're writing off paint, drywall, and all those kinds of things. He's like, they're just going to take the same skill set and move it to another area. And I was like, that always stuck with me.
Yeah, it's funny, and I thought about it, like, Tripper had an LLC, right? And I still have, like, if I pull up a shelf right next to me here, I've got old royalty checks that I never cashed. It were like for 6 and 40 cents and things like that are just funny to have around. Like, you had to do banking. I remember one time we got paid for a show and they wrote the name wrong on the check. Instead of like making it out to me or to making it out to one of the guys in the band, they made it out to the wrong LLC. So I had to take a CD cover into the bank with my ID with proof that I own the LLC just to get him to cash like a $700 check from somebody. It was funny. And you start that problem solving mentality you learn on the road. Like, we blew a trailer tire on the way to a shore in northern Michigan. Like, problem solving becomes part of it. The business side of it you don't think about comes into it. Schedule management. I mean, it's crazy. Like, just the things that were parallels that when I was much younger, I never thought of until now. And I look at some of the things that we do and the creativity part, right? We're a creative agency. We're a branding agency. So we've got to think of taglines. And, I do some voiceovers for us. Like, we're writing jingles in some cases. Like, we just do things that tie back to those days that I find really weirdly satisfying, because when I was in college, anything that I took as a class in communications, I thought of as completely separate. And now in life, none of those things are separate. They blur much, much more than you would ever think. And I think about now, like, if you and I were playing shows like we were back in 03, 04, 05 and things like that, man, when we were really rolling, and if we had social media, like, the world would have been completely different for the things that we did. And I think like the time, was it, you guys are with us tonight in Cincinnati. We played the Midpoint Festival, right? Where we played somewhere and you guys played down the street.
You guys we played in Cincinnati. It wasn't with you. You guys were in town at the same time though.
We all played the same festival, and it was like, there was 5 Detroit bands there and we all ended up kind of in the same places, which I thought was hilarious.
I remember I had lunch with an old bass player from our band probably before the pandemic. It was when a lot of social media went to a different level, Snapchat, TikTok, everything. And he's like, if all that stuff was out now, all stuff now that was out back then. He goes, our strategy had to be so different, like film us in the studio to give like
Uh-huh.
teasers. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, we were like the flyer band, hung up
Uh-huh.
flyers around Metro
All the
Detroit,
time.
threw
We
them
had a
off
street team, man. Like,
yeah, street teams.
yeah.
The
And
Metro
it was
Times hated us, hired paid them in, CDs and a little bit of money, hired a street team to go out. This, we
yep.
didn't do our vetting properly, but they took stickers and put them all over the Metro Times newspaper stands. And we got a really
God.
nasty email saying, you guys are defacing our property. It's like, it wasn't us. We
Yeah.
swear.
With some guy, with some random guy. This isn't mine, I swear. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good times.
But yeah, and looking at your current agency, the MBE Group, you've really led the team through significant growth and some major rebrands. What's been the key to staying agile in such a fast evolving industry? It seems to be changing overnight.
Yeah, I think being open to change is the number one thing. Being flexible, understanding that change happens with or without you, and you can fight it or you can embrace it. And if you embrace it, you can really do good things. And we've been very good at being strategic in what we want to do and who we want to be. So we're a specialist agency. There's either generalists or specialists, and generalists will do anything, and we're specialists. So we're in 3 verticals. We're fully global. That's what we do. But we do everything in those. So if you need logo designs, brand designs, website builds, event management, crisis communications, we do a lot of things like that in those verticals. We're very clear and strategic with that. On the flip side of that, we're exceptionally opportunistic. We are very interested in change. The agency that we bought, Growth Machine, back in January, prior to making that decision, we had vetted probably 60 other agencies because we knew we wanted 3 specific paths to this growth of doubling the size of the company. So we planned on it. And then we had vetted all these agencies, and then Growth Machine kind of came up out of nowhere. Was a whim that came up from a broker we were talking to, and it worked out. The team, fit what we were trying to do. The skills they had, the team they had fit with what we wanted to be. So it fit the strategy, but it was an opportunistic find. So we've been very open. My partner, Tom, and I are very clear with our team that we're open to change. We're flexible. We're opportunistic. We don't think there's one way of doing things. We don't like to say, well, this is how we've always done it. So we're very aggressive in being opportunistic. And I think change is, I tell the team often, and every so often I speak at universities, and I say time and change are 2 things that go with or without you. You can decide what you want them to be, right? That's really what it comes down to.
And looking back, how did the local Detroit culture shape your identity as a communicator from working, within the auto industry? Everyone here is touched by the auto industry, whether they realize it or not, or, from the band days or just, any of the other companies you've been with.
It's really interesting. I've worked all over the world. I've traveled all over the world, mostly through this job and even through doing shows back in the day. Detroit is invaluable. It's been absolutely invaluable. And I tell everybody when we work in different places, I was just in Miami at a global conference of our affiliate partners, and I try to explain that Detroit is a 2 degrees of separation town. I know you, you know one other person. And if I need to get to that person, I can hit you up, and without question, you're going to hit. And the same for you. If you hit me up with something, you're like, hey, man, do you know this guy? This town is exceptionally communal. It is the smallest big city that I've ever been to in my life. And, my dad was an executive in the auto industry, and I was like, I will never do that. And then, here we are. And the people here are great. I mean, the weather's been terrible lately, and, we have too long of winters. But aside from that, the communal part of Detroit has been exceptional. And I look at even back in the day when we were doing shows, I remember so many shows that our band played where other bands would come in and they'd be like, there'd be this adversarial thinking, and they'd come here, and that was not the way it was. Like, we were cool. I don't even know how many times we played together over the years. And there was like 6 other bands like that we played with. There's people that you and I see on social media now that we did shows with there in that era. And I can go back to the early 90s of playing shows with people like the Voodoo Hippies, for example, and Steve Taylor, who became a lifelong friend.
Yeah.
Who
Dude.
actually stood in, right? He stood in for us for some shows over the years. I ran into him in an airport in Arizona last year, right? I mean, just randomly. So the scene in Detroit from a business standpoint and a music standpoint, it's a people-based, network-based scene. If you know somebody, they probably know somebody that you want to know. And it becomes really interesting when you travel around the world because they drop things about Detroit culturally, yet this reputation still precedes itself in Europe and in Asia. If I'm in Japan, they'll ask about Detroit. Like, oh, is Detroit getting better? Well, yeah, because you don't hear all of the real stories about how good Detroit really is and kind of always has been. But now we look at it in this way of we set the standard in a lot of things around the world. And that culturally says something. First traffic light, first paved road, Motown, all these things that we've had around here. You think of some of the bands right here. I mean, you and I can walk the streets and run into Bob Seger, Eminem. Like it's just a weird town in that way where in LA, it's kind of frowned upon, right? In New York, they're all hiding. In Detroit, they just, hey, what's up? How you doing? And that whole thing for me, I take a great pride in being from Detroit when I'm working around the world, because you just learn things. You have a toughness, but you also have a Midwestern sensibility side of where you're, decent people. It's just hard to explain to people that aren't from here until they come here and they spend time and they say, well, that's way cooler than I thought it was going to be. And to me, that's really, really cool. So it shapes a lot of who we are. And we take a lot of pride on the business side of being from here and being connected to a lot of things. Our business, being connected to the auto industry, being connected to the tech industry. We do a lot of work in government relations, right? I've worked directly with the governor. We worked with Senator Stabenow and Representative Dingell. We work with a lot of people, the mayor of Detroit. The mayor of Rochester did a proclamation when we adopted a 3-legged kitten. Like you get connected to people here and it just blossoms outward, I think.
It's one thing we learned about the celebrity thing. I remember we're in the same suburb area of Metro Detroit near Oakland University, and right near Oakland University a number of years ago, big SUV drove by and someone was like, "Was that Eminem?" I was like, "Yeah."
Yeah, exactly.
It's not like unheard of to like see him around. Yeah. And of course there's, like you said, Bob Seger, Kid Rock.
Yeah.
Jack White is in Nashville
too, right? Yeah. My wife did work with Jack White and a couple guys at Queens of the Stone Age. My wife's company previously made all the uniforms that Third Man Record wears down at the record pressing plant in Detroit. You get connected to people in a really weird way. I used to play basketball with a couple of the ex-Bad Boys. Like you just get connected to people, right? Like you can't walk, like now it's the Jared Goff chance, right? Like you'll walk to I've been at a National Coney Island and seen Calvin Johnson there. Like it's just the town is just communal, and that it works because people that come here tend to want to stay here, especially from a business and a community standpoint. The summers are great too, man. The summers are great here. Winters are freaking brutal. But
besides the Great Lakes, there's so many small lakes that are
lakes.
Still great.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
It's funny because when we first met, I mean, we're talking like MySpace days.
Oh my God, yeah.
So for all you kiddos, that's what came before Facebook, but after Friendster. Yeah, we hit it off, and I remember hearing you guys' stuff online, and I was like, and we ran into each other at shows, and I was like, we should be doing shows together. We're very similar style, very complementary. Yeah. And prior to that, we were with kind of like a booking agency / PR agency, and it was a hodgepodge. And they kind of took any style of band, and we're playing. And we met a lot of great people to this day. But we were playing with like a metal band one night, and I love metal. But I mean, our band was. I mean, you've heard our band a million times. We're Jimmy Eat World, Goo Goo Dolls, Matchbox 20, and we're
90s alt rock, brother.
And it sounded like we were playing a show with Slayer. I mean, there wasn't a lot of crossover, a lot of mutual respect. You can have a beer together and have some laughs, but it's like, what are we doing here? There's a reason why certain bands pair together when they do shows, or, it's a crossover. Again, you find that target audience, back to the marketing, targeted marketing. But when we did a lot of those shows around Metro Detroit, the person who ran at the time really didn't know what he was doing. His heart was in the right place. But we also walked into a lot of animosity, like you said, and we're like, wait, these guys don't even they don't even want to do a show with us. They're not cool. And it's like, then we started realizing you guys, obviously Frankie D'Angelo's band, the Gelheads out of Chicago, so many bands, and that the guys in Colic we played shows with, and we're like, wait, we've like hit it off as friends even before we played a show. We could do so much more together, like borrow someone's gear, helping each other out. And of course, one of the most infamous shows that we all played together was the Battle for Bon Jovi.
Oh my God.
At Memphis Smoke in Royal Oak, Michigan.
Yeah, that was a lesson learned, man.
I clearly remember 96.3 put it on.
Yeah.
And there were 10 bands for 2 slots. So you're each playing at 2 nights at the Palace. And what was funny is that, a lot of great people at 96.3, but they didn't do a lot of local shows like WRAF or 89X. So when we walked in, they did a snippet like a week ahead of time, a few seconds of each band playing. And I remember we definitely have our work cut out for us. There's some good bands we're going to be up against. I hear you guys, I hear us. And I walk in, I'm like, out of 10 bands, we're friends with like 4 or 5 of them.
Yeah.
I remember we play. We didn't win. You guys didn't win. But I remember walking in with your guitar player, Steve, from the parking lot. And I said, we all want this, but if we're going to lose, I want to lose to you guys or another band that we're friends with.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, we all want to be on stage opening for Bon Jovi in front of
At the
16,000
Palace.
people
Yeah.
at the Palace,
Exactly.
Auburn Hills.
Exactly.
So I remember the Monday after the Battle of the Bands, it was a Friday, they were talking about on 96.3, and one of the DJs said, it was so nice to see all the bands like talking and like giving each other tips on gear. And I was like, this is what we do. We've been doing this for years.
Yeah. Yeah. I used to run sound for a couple other bands just as on a whim in Royal Oak if they were playing. I would stand in and sing for other bands in town if they needed somebody like I remember driving up to Lansing to play with the radio guys, Brandon Calhoun and those guys when he was out of town and they needed me to sing for him. And I don't sing like him at all, right? Like, I mean, he's Black Crowes, Southern rock, and I'm over here like completely different. But we had such a good time that was how it went. That show, it's funny that you mentioned the word business earlier, and this is one of the things that comes back to even what we deal with in our businesses today. You and I both deal with it. And that I'm convinced that battle was rigged from the beginning, since both bands that won were managed by Bon Jovi's management company. One of them had been getting airplay, was the brother of somebody on the radio station. Like it had nothing to do with our merit. We packed a club, we all played our asses off, we had a great time, but that thing was fixed from the beginning. That the music business makes the mafia look like German engineers. And we were Tripper was signed to a label for a while. And I did meetings in LA with these guys, and there were some things that I learned pretty quickly that were like, no, I don't think we want to be a part of this. So we did a couple records on that label, and we got some, airplay out of it, and we got on some soundtracks and things like that. I remember this one compilation that we were getting airplay in Australia, and I was like, yeah, let's go play there. Let's do this. And that didn't happen. We nearly had a national ad campaign with Dodge come out of that. But I remember just the things that were really strange that went on behind the scenes. And in that era, when radio was king, like payola was the thing, right? They were just paying people to play. That's how we ended up with Creed. And my cousin's the guitar player in Creed, and I can't stand Creed. Like, you're talking about, like, I think the music's terrible. I don't know if that's, part that's supposed to be part of the political correctness of this podcast, but like, they were paying them to play. You read Butch Walker's book, right?
Oh, yeah.
The three doors down, right? Same thing. They were getting paid. He got paid to have them on a bill or something. He was like, these guys are terrible. So you learn, and it's the same thing in business, man. I see it today. There are people that we work with, that we engage with, that you just can't trust them. They're just not good people. And I think one of the things you sent me before we talked about this was, if there's anything that I learned, or there's one lesson that I've learned from all of this, it's not to get away from bad people as quickly as possible. And that's the hard part. And that's why it was interesting in the music scene here. Like, we would do shows with bands, and they would already act like they were Bon Jovi level, or at that point Matchbox 20 level, or Panic at the Disco, or Fall Out Boy level. And it was like, look, man, we're going to be dudes. We're going to be dudes other people want to hang with. We're going to come and play shows. We're going to have fun with it. You can trust us not to be idiots and tear the place up. And we did. We still get together. We just haven't played in a while. It's one of these things where we're kind of like, we're not a breakup band. We're like going to play when we play, but we're older and we all got kids and jobs and things like that. And I take a lot of the lessons we learned playing in those eras. Like, I hang out with people that own agencies that compete with mine, and they're really good people. They're really good people. On the same side of that coin are other agencies and people in marketing that I know that I'd count my fingers after a handshake with them. Just don't trust them. Don't think they're good people. And it was the same in the music scene, man. We saw how many times, like, club owners how many clubs did we play over the years that you wouldn't consider ever playing now, knowing what you know?
Yeah, we learned, you learn after falling down a few times what clubs you want to play, which ones you want to avoid, or who's running the club. And then you're like, oh, I want to be there because so-and-so is running it, and they run a tight ship, and you're like, this is why. And there's no screwing around. I mean, we've had people that were, close with us, friends of the band, or they would sell merch for us, and we had a clicker. I'd say, click people as they walk in. If you miss one or two, not a big deal. Because at the end of the night, they're like, you guys had 40 people. I'm like, no, we had 85. You learn that roughness and being able to fall down and can you take feedback? And it's like I always say, if you played in a band, it's a school of hard knocks for sure. So
Yeah. I mean, and like the good stuff is really hard to, I'll get together with the guys and you know, we'll sit around whatever, having a drink, a cigar at Steve's pool in his backyard or something. And just like we talk about, what's your favorite this, what's your favorite that moment. And those are always those you have for a long time. And I think it's the same in some of the business stuff where we do some things where we talked. I was at a breakfast meeting on Wednesday with a publisher of one of the magazines here, and we were talking about these nights we used to have at the Frankfurt Auto Show that would have these beer garden parties at the end of the show that would just get absolutely stupid, and they were so much freaking fun. And that show doesn't exist anymore, right? So it's gone. But like I remember those moments, and I remember the people. And I think what's interesting about like even what we do in marketing, right? Especially we're doing our B2C, our consumer side work. Like you might be selling stuff, but it needs to be an experience. You got to have something that's like why was it cool? What do you remember about those moments? And so you're selling emotion in some cases, or you're selling nostalgia in some cases. And I find it fascinating. I sit, there's some nights I'll be sitting in my backyard or something, and I get ads from Fender. I'm like, oh man, I should just buy that. And I got a bunch of guitars sitting behind me right here, and I don't play as much as I used to, right? And I got a baby grand piano upstairs that I use sometimes, like when we play family games and I win, I'll just go play "We Are the Champions" to taunt my wife and kid. Like, and that's a lot of where music comes from now, like just from fun stuff. And there's no pressure on it to play the way we played, right? And in business, what we do now, the pressures are different, the stresses are different, but I can remember them feeling the same. I mean, think of the studio times, right? You're sitting in the studio, you're spending all this money, and what comes out isn't what you like, and you got to go back in and fix it. It's the same thing I do with a lot of editing and marketing work now. It's the same principle.
speaking of that, as CEO and chief creative officer, how do you find a balance, with creative energy and executive responsibilities? Because like you said, you're running the firm with your
Yeah.
partners, and having to turn a profit, but also you get to go down that rabbit hole of you get the creative things going and you might look up and 6 hours went by.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. I'm not built to be a person that sits in one place all the time. So I can't do a job. I can never be an accountant, right? I don't even think I'd ever be a doctor, right? I couldn't do the same thing every day. So for me, there's a lot of variety in what we do. And I get to mix it up, which is I get to mix it up a lot, right? There's things I work on during the day where I've kind of found entertainment in like 3-year financial planning or digging through the numbers and finding things and making them work. And then there's things on the creative side where I get, fired up. Like we're launching an AI platform over the next few weeks that we've been working on for a couple of months. And I think if you and I talked 6 months ago, I would have been like, yeah, we're looking at AI and it's kind of going to be a thing, but I want to be real careful with it. Now, after 3 months of being heavy on this platform, I'm like, no, we're using it. This thing's fantastic and it's the best one that's out there. So that stuff fires me up to be able to, I love launching brands. That's my favorite thing of anything that we do. So taking something from nothing and bringing it to market is my favorite thing to do. It's no different writing a song and bringing it and then driving home and hearing it on, 96.3, like you mentioned, right? Like and that's happened like Sunday morning, driving home, hearing one of our songs and being like, why do I know these guys? Oh, that's us. Like that stuff's cool to see things go from nothing to something. And so the balance for me is great because it's not a balance in a sense that I got to have a work-life balance. It's I get to do different things all the time, and the variety gives you the motivation and the energy. And I think it's not for everybody. We multitask a lot, right? And I got really good friends that aren't multitaskers, right? They're engineers, and that's how they think, and I think that's what makes variety great.
That kind of leads to the next question is what role do you see AI playing in the future of marketing? You guys have taken on this other area. What role do you see it playing?
It's going to play a massive role. It's it. If you're not involved with it now, you better get involved with it. And if you don't, goodbye. You're done. And it's going to change how, for us, there's this front end phase of AI where you have to be experienced and creative enough to set the prompts up properly. And then that middle piece, it builds everything for you. And then at the end, you have to have the skill to edit it into what's right. The voice has to be right. The words, the visuals, everything has to be what the client wants or what you want for your company. It's that middle piece that's going to change. It's going to change how long it takes to do things. You're going to be much more efficient by using it. It's going to enable you to look at more things more quickly than you could before. So we can do ad comparisons, or a trade show booth design, or social media images, and we can make 30 of them where it would have taken us, a month. And now it's going to take 15 minutes, 20 minutes. You still got to edit, you still got to put the prompts in on the front end properly, but it's going to really help a lot, and it's really going to change how we do things. There's a lot of people thinking it's going to cost jobs. I think it really is going to just change the jobs. What you do and how you do it's going to be different. Like for us as an agency, we bill a lot based on time, how long it takes to do something. I think that's gone. I think we're getting into an era where you're going to be providing estimates to people based on how much output you're providing them and what that output is.
And are there any trends like for marketers? What should an agency, like if I were to hire you as a marketing advisor or something for something I started, like what are areas you would be advising myself, saying, hey, this is what you should be preparing for now when it comes to AI?
That there's going to be more of it, and it can be used in ways you don't think it can be used in. If you look at AI, I think, again, speed is going to be a part of what changes a lot of things now. You're going to have to do things faster than you did before, and you're able to with it. Where you use AI is going to change. Like you're in the HR world, right? You guys do a lot of stuff that's repeatable processes, repeatable activities. This is going to help a ton. You're not going to have to do the same thing over and over again. Repeatable tasks can be automated by AI. That'll really change how you do things. You can communicate faster. You can communicate a little better. Having reported to HR at a job I previously had, it wasn't their strong suit. In how you communicate, when you communicate, the ways you communicate will be a lot more efficient, easier. And anything repeatable that you can automate with AI, you're going to have to. It just, because it'll simplify your life.
Yeah. And on the agency side, what's one lesson you've learned from running your company that you'd pass on to the next generation of creatives or entrepreneurs? You mentioned you speak at university sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's a couple of things. The people part, right? This is a people job. Even with AI, right? You still have to be the person that loads in the front of AI. And at the end of it, you're still talking to a person. It's about people. It's about connecting with people, whether it's B2B, B2C, it doesn't matter. You've got to understand who you're talking to, understanding your audience. So the lessons are like, I get asked this by the students when I go and talk at universities. Like I had one say, what's the one thing you wish you would have done differently? And I go back to what I said earlier, that I spent a lot of time working for bad people, and there are people they're just not good people. And I did it for too long in some cases and wish I hadn't. So the people piece of this is the hardest part of the job. You can learn, I say it often to the students, we can teach you any skill there is. You got to be willing to work. You got to be willing to learn, but you cannot teach attitude. You cannot teach engagement. You cannot teach motivation. People are who they are in those cases. So understand that no two people are the same that you're dealing with, especially for you. Like if you're an HR man, like nobody is the same. You can get some groups and you can get some numbers together. And I know there's a lot of stats. I don't see anything easy that comes from having people. They're just, people change, they grow, their life, maybe they're just getting married or they're just having kids. Like dealing with people is understand that is going to be a challenge. And anytime I work with somebody that says, I think I have the people part figured out. No, it's just no. And there are things you can figure out on how to work with people. I just feel like
building
relationships, understanding what they need. And then there's this balance of sometimes there's things that people need that you have to do for them with you're running a business. You still have to run a business, man. And there are things that come with that sometimes you're the bad guy. Sometimes you're the villain. That's just the way it goes. So for me, the lessons are, be willing to work, be willing to learn, embrace change, understand that you're dealing with people and working with people, and those things will balance out. They tend to reduce the stress a little if you know that that's part of it going into it. Makes your life a lot easier.
You mentioned that, creating brands and building brands are one of your most favorite things. So if you could work on a dream campaign for any brand, who would it be? Or, what product or person, service?
Yeah, it's really funny. I thought about that. I was thinking about something like that a couple of weeks ago. We were talking about it. And I go back and forth on some of those, because there's days where I'm like, I would love to work for these guys, or I would love to, if we could design like cigar rings or like packaging for something, I would love it. Like just things like that pop into my head. But I was at this conference a few years ago, and this dude was a keynote speaker. He was a social media director for NASA. Like that would be
Wow.
cool. NASA would be cool because space is cool, man. And the only time space sucks is if something blows up. Otherwise, space is, and in some cases, stuff blowing up like a supernova in space is awesome. So I was looking at this guy's speech. I was listening. I'm looking at the presentation. He had 500 handles he was responsible for at NASA. And he started listing them off, and it was like the Mars rover, Pluto mission, and New Horizons, and the Voyager program, all this stuff. And I'm like, nothing he just said isn't cool. So, like, for me, something like NASA would be really cool. And there's the big ones, like, we're interesting as a company because we don't target some of these major companies because you just get lost. You become a vendor and not a partner. Our thing is we are a partner. We will not be transactional with our clients. We're either strategic or we're not. We can't work with you. And somebody like that NASA would be probably one of the top ones for me. But like, man, it'd be cool to work for Fender. One of my partners in Germany works for Shure microphones. And like those would be cool on the music side. But I think like it'd be cool to have like one of these Vice clients, like a rum brand or a cigar brand where you like, that audience and you can really dig in. That stuff for me is the coolest, and again, bringing something from nothing. We're working on a mobile phone project right now that's been really cool because it's Apple accessories primarily, and digging into that world and the finances of that world and just the sheer numbers. It's crazy. Even AI, like we're launching it. Like I said, we're launching this AI platform. I had to do some research on it a week and a half ago. That's 400 million Chat GPT users a week. 400 million. And these guys are starting out and they're like, man, if we can get to 1 million users, I'm like, that could happen in 3 days if we market this thing properly because of the way it uses. So that brand stuff for me, love that, man. Love it. That's a really good question because I think if I run into you at a Marvelous 3 concert in New York this fall, I might say something totally different, right? I got another partner in LA. She's responsible for tourism Tahiti. She does PR for the whole country of Tahiti to get tourists to come to Tahiti from America and Mexico.
Yeah, speaking of branding, you said, some of those different brands, again, a mutual connection. I'm not sure if you know who he is. I know you've seen him on social media, but Greg Sobel, he's a drummer. I worked with his dad for a number of years when I worked in higher education. He was a faculty member. Greg and I talked for years. He's a drummer. He's played in bands in LA, Detroit. Well, he just launched a tequila brand. He's going to be on the podcast as well. We're trying to figure out a way to, we're going to meet together so we can do a tasting on camera.
You're going to need samples on that one. That might be an in-person one, man.
Yeah, we're still figuring that out. With your creative side, what's one book, album, or podcast that's your go-to that inspired you how to lead?
I don't have one. I always do little, I mentioned the variety thing from the way my brain works. I always tend to look at a couple of different things here and there. It's been more people than those kind of things as far as meeting or like finding those ways to mentor yourself, like learning. There's a book that I read on like I mentioned the bad people at work thing. Like I went through a stretch of my career where there was like, I didn't align with the people I was working for. And there's this book called The No Asshole Rule. I read that one.
I have it.
It's a really good book on dealing with confrontational and workplace cancer type people, and you get them everywhere. Like you get them everywhere. I haven't really been at a large company in my life where I didn't see something like that. That helped just for understanding like what I found in those situations, and I will be more positive. I promise you that they try to make it about you're the problem, and you realize that you're not. And you've got to balance that out. But I had the advantage of my career of it's been people, man. I got really good mentors and really good people I had a couple of bosses over the years that have become lifelong friends. I actually went down to Florida a couple of weeks ago for a conference and spent time with them. And one of the guys anyway ended up in his wedding. Like the people have always been more than the stuff. And for me, like music's always been kind of I've never used music to be something that's a career thing for me. It's really strange. Like for me, music is almost like a distraction these days. And like my kid is 17 now and we go to concerts together and he likes different music than I like. And then we like a lot of the same stuff. And so we got in the car last night and he played Japanese punk for me like that, he's into anime and Pokemon and all this crazy stuff and teaching himself Japanese. So I get a lot of Japanese music we would never hear. That to me is where people bring you into things that reinforce your value, reinforce that you're in the right place, and that make you better and they care about your success. And I've tried to, that's why I speak at colleges, man, because I feel like that didn't happen when I was in college. And I want people to get the reality check of one, what they're going into, and two, what it takes to get a job, what it takes to work in our fields, man. Like like I think you should give back. So, and I'm a global mentor as part of our network of agencies now to mid-level people that want to be, that do it, what I do now. Whether the people might think they're crazy or not, that you want to own an agency or you out of your mind. Like, no, there are really good things, but what it takes is that people piece, is understanding finances, understanding who you are and what you want to be. So when you ask that question, for me is really hard. I can't pinpoint one thing where I go, this book changed my life or this podcast changed my life. I'm always around music, man. Like when I drive, I don't listen to anything but music on the way to work or sports radio, especially during football season. But it's weird. That's a weird thing, man, because I should. And I should watch more TED Talks and I should do more stuff like that. But I find my motivation in like going to our global conferences and seeing 30 of my partners and hearing what's going on in Poland or what's going on in Argentina. It's strange. Maybe it's weird. I don't know. Maybe your other guests are like, yeah, man, I read this book and it's awesome. I just don't have one. It's strange.
No, it's all, everyone approaches things differently. It's awesome. So as if we start to wind down, where can listeners connect with you and see more of MBE's work, and what's next on the horizon that you can share?
Yeah, I would. MBE.group is our website. I'm on LinkedIn, and if anybody's on here and they want to connect, feel free, please. Let's connect. And what's next for us is we're on this 3-year plan to double the size of the company, which includes, exit planning and succession planning and all of those things, because you have to think of that in our world. And if you don't, you end up down the road and you can't go anywhere. And so we're very deliberate in how we want to structure where we're going. We're about to launch this massive AI platform, which we'll start marketing over the next couple of weeks. And then one of the things that for me has been really good is we have ownership shares in some other companies that are launching really cool tech in the auto space and in the mobile phone space and the personal accessory space, that all brand launches. So for me, that's kind of where we're at, looking at what's next. And I will say this as part of the motivation question that you just asked, like seeing these things blow up is my motivation over the next 5 years. I'm not a long-term planner, never been a long-term planner in my life. If you were interviewing me 20 years ago or even 10 years ago, and we were sitting in a job interview, man, in your HR capacity and said, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Hate it. I would never answer that question, man. Never. And it hasn't been until the last few where I've looked at, like, you have to have succession planning if you're an entrepreneur and you're not thinking about what's next. Sorry, man. Good luck. Good luck. You're either going to get stuck in it or you're going to run it into the ground, because you've got to replace yourself at some point. And you've got to think about who you are, what you want to be, why you matter. So for me, it's about on the career path, it's about being relevant, but not being required, and maybe being needed, but not necessary for our company to be successful. So that's kind of where we position ourselves. My partner and I are both on the same path, and really getting to work on cool global launches. So that's kind of what we want to do. That's what's next for us, is really taking that acquisition and blowing it up into the next phase of the company.
Perfect. And with that, we're going to jump into the Encore section.
Oh, God.
If you were to share your Spotify playlist, what are some artists we would find? And I probably know many of them.
Yeah. I got asked this by a couple of my Gen Z colleagues about 2 months ago. I have two very distinct paths, and I listen to a lot of stuff. So mainly, you know me, man, I'm mainly a rock guy and a pop punk guy, but I get into the reggae and the jazz and, some other crazy stuff like that. But I have my brain is split in two segments in music these days. The big bands, right? You know them, right? So it's 21 Pilots, it's Muse, it's Fall Out Boy, it's Panic, it's Blink 182, it's Foo Fighters. And then I have this like indie level, mid-level bunch of groups that I absolutely love. So you talk like Water Parks, The Mains, and Atlantic, Beauty School Dropout, obviously Marvelous 3, things like that. All of these bands, Hot Milk is a great band out of the UK, like angsty male, female fronted bands. Mariana's Trench is a killer band from Canada that my son and I just went and saw. And that's how I work, man. I got these big bands that I listen to, All Time Low, right? In that group. And then these like mid-level up and comers, Catfish and the Bottlemen, phenomenal band from Wales, right? That stuff is this weird. And I'm an alt nation guy on Sirius XM, I'm either listening to Alt Nation, maybe some new wave stuff, 80s stuff. Hair Nation is on the list pretty consistently. Little yacht rock, man, so that's where I'm at on music these days, all over the place. Will also bands I wish I had appreciated when I was younger, man. Fleetwood Mac, Queen, Beastie Boys, really into a lot of that stuff now too.
What is a guilty pleasure? Food, TV, whatever comes to mind.
Oh, man, guilty pleasure. That's a good question. That's a fun question because I would say, like, for me, it's like I'm not a super guilty pleasure guy. I don't do a lot of crazy stuff, but golf and cigars are my two real, like, I wouldn't call it their pleasures, not guilty pleasures. I go to a massage joint and a chiropractor once a month. That for sure, because we're old, man. We're getting old. Like, stuff starts not working, man. So I was the chiropractor this morning, like, just getting the tune up. But those are mine. Yeah. You got a crazy one, man?
As a guilty pleasure? Yeah, a lot of people don't know about me is I am an airline spotter. So I will sit at the airport or anywhere we're at. And I'm like, oh, that's an A320. That's the 737.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's a 737, 700. I'm like, that's an A330. And my kids are like, why do you know that?
I like the wide body A330s, man. The ones I fly to Europe. I like those.
Yeah, they're like, why do you know that? And I'm like, I don't know, but I do. So I had this fun hobby of like reading up a ton of stuff on the airline industry for the last 20 years, how it revolutionized and got deregulated in the 70s to modern day, seeing the darlings like your Southwest and JetBlue. And then obviously they're going through a lot of, turbulence right now as a company.
Yeah.
And seeing it all duplicated around the world in Canada and Asia and Europe with Ryanair and other companies like that.
I've flown Ryanair.
I always thought, yeah, I got family in Spain and other countries. So I've always heard stories. They're like, it's kind of like the spirit of Europe.
Yeah. And TAP. I've flown TAP in Portugal too. I've done that one. Yeah, they're crazy. So now when I'm doing my cigar vices on my patio, sometimes I will see the contrails and I will go on FlightAware and find out. I try to guess where the flight is going.
That's what I do.
I look it up. I do it all the time, man, because they fly right over our house, right? That East Coast and the Europe route is right over the tops of our houses.
Yeah, between really cool. 4 and 10 p.m. and they're all heading east, right? We're right in the flight path. We're going to Europe. I'm like, okay, it's either Air France, Delta, or at night, like around midnight, they're flying from Chicago.
Yes.
Right over our house going to Europe. I'm like, oh, that's TAP or that's Swiss, whatever it is, going right to Europe. So it's kind of funny where things are.
That's funny, man. That's cool, though. That's cool.
What's a fun or unique fact many people may not know about you?
I have a weird entertainment family history. I mentioned I mentioned to you before we got on the call that so one of my cousins is a guitar player in Creed. One of my other cousins is Steve Buscemi, the actor. He's part of my great grandfather's line, that's the New York line of our family. And then I had another uncle who was an adjacent part of the Rat Pack back in the day. So very weird entertainment categories. And so somehow it was maybe preordained that I ended up doing some at least ancillary work in the entertainment segment. But those are, I get asked about, are you related to Steve the actor? It's like, what? No way. And I get that one quite a bit. And then
the bass player in Airheads.
Yeah, the bass player in Airheads. Yeah. And then, the Creed one was always funny because my mom's maiden name is Tremonti, and that's how and I think I've met him once in my life because they didn't live here when I was younger. They were here younger when I was in my teens, and then they moved to Florida, I guess, that side of the family. But yeah, those are kind of funny. And my uncle that we acted with Sinatra and Dean Martin and Sammy Davis Jr., I only met him once in my life. We were flying to Hawaii and we had a layover in LA and he met us. That's the only time I ever met the guy. So odd. Yeah, odd. You get into weird situations. One of the weirder, I played basketball with Eminem at his house once. That's one of the weirder stories I have in the music world. Of all the stuff I ever did, all the stuff we ever did together, man, like the places we played, people we saw, being on the radio. Got interviewed by Rolling Stone once for when I worked for Kmart Corporate back in the day. I got interviewed about age restrictions on CDs and video games when one of Eminem's records came out. And then years later, I played basketball with him at his house when he was rehabbing his knee. And just a weird connections, man. Just weird connections all these years. This is that whole thing I said about Detroit being like 2 degrees of separation,
So here's a bonus question that you didn't know was coming is, who was the cheesier in the 80s, Kiss or Bon Jovi?
Kiss, man. This is probably going to be unpopular. I think Kiss is one of the worst bands in history. I get a lot of heat for that.
Making sure Frankie and Timmy hear that from the Gelheads.
Frankie and I talked about it very briefly once. I didn't want to end our friendship, so I didn't say anything. But I just I think it's funny. I listen to some of those bands that you and I probably grew up on that I liked when I was younger. I think like Rat. I liked Rat when I was a kid, and I hear them now. I'm like, what? How? Doc, I think is horrific as a band. Horrific. And I'm thinking of George Lynch, like going, dude, you did Lynch Mob. That's all you had to do. And no, absolutely. Yeah. I get, yeah. So I think Bon Jovi knew what they were doing, and they clearly did it pretty damn well. And everybody wanted to be them at that point. I never wanted to wear like, freaking 6-inch, boots and makeup when I played music ever. And I know you guys are fans, so I apologize for
Oh
my
no, I'm more of a
transgression.
Bon Jovi fan any day than
Figured, yeah,
Kiss.
okay. Figured
So
that.
when
Exactly.
Frankie and I drove to Chicago a couple of years ago to see the Marvelous 3 show at the House of Blues where we ran into you,
Yeah.
We had a debate in the car, and I said, I'm going to make a playlist on Spotify we'll listen
Oh,
to.
God.
Who was the cheesiest, of the 80s? Unmasked, Kiss, Bon Jovi, whether it was Image or songs. And then I made even a D list, and I was like, here you go. Let's listen to Heaven's Edge and Brittany Fox and Sweet FA. And he goes, man, you weren't kidding. I was like, yeah, I'm like D or E list bands.
Oh yeah, like Shotgun Messiah had to be in there, right?
Oh
Like
yeah.
you're getting deep. You're getting deep with
Yeah.
those Steelheart. I heard those guys the other day. Bullet Boys. Yeah.
That's the funny thing. It's like even being in such a big sports town, I'm not a football guy. Besides Jared Goff, I can't name one player on the Lions. Back in the day, Barry Sanders days I could.
Yeah.
But if you want to talk about the third album from Rat and who played bass and who produced it,
Yeah.
I'm your guy.
See, and that's what makes this thing like my family's had Lions season tickets since 1971. Right. So I've been going to Lions games since I was 5 years old. I was not 5 in 1971, by the way, for your listening audience here. But yeah, so I had this, I was always been a sports idiot, and that's how I ended up a sports writer. That's what the college piece was. I was going to go to broadcasting school and be a play-by-play guy. And I didn't. And glad I didn't, because you couldn't do what we did in all those years of playing shows. And I did, I've done 7 records in that time. And like, I covered high school football. When does high school football happen? Thursday, Friday nights. So I would go and cover a game. I'd have to go to the Oakland Press, write the story, and then I'd have to take scores and updates from other games till 2 a.m. That was every Friday in the fall. You can't date, and you certainly can't play rock shows if you cover in high school football. So you get that. That's where you're like, you're questioning about the career path thing is always fascinating, because I've got Ken Thomas, drummer and tripper, had one job, really went to Chrysler, and he took a buyout from Stellantis last year. He was there 29 years. I can't do that. My brain would like turn to mush. And that's what he wanted. He's like, I'm going to be an engineer, man. That's what I'm going to do. And and some people, that's what they want. I got a couple other buddies, 20, 30 years at the same job. This whole thing is different, but music was his outlet. Playing hockey was his outlet, was Ken's, right? Like, that's what we did. So we would do our day jobs. And in some cases, I'm sure you did it too, when you guys were playing all those shows over the years. Like, I'd go to work. Sometimes we had a show in Lansing. I'd go drive to Lansing, play the show, and be at work the next morning.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we did that several times, driving home from Saginaw or something at 2 a.m. And we didn't drink alcohol or anything. It's because you're drinking a Monster Energy drink going down I-75.
Yeah.
Getting 3 hours sleep. And you're like, man, you're looking back, you're like, how did we even do that?
Okay, so here's a question for you then. This is the bonus question you didn't know was coming, because this came up in a conversation I had on Wednesday when I was driving out to an event. Craziest towns you ever played in?
Obviously, we did most of our shows here in Metro Detroit. One weird town that we played, and I love the city for a number of other reasons, is Traverse City. Drove up, and this story is funny to the guys that used to be in my band. We're still friends. I haven't talked to a couple of them in a while, but they'll remember this hands down. And we're playing, and it was the Union Station, whatever the big bar
Union
is.
Street Station.
Union Street Station. We're playing there. And the stage is somewhat high up.
Yeah.
It's not just like a foot off the ground. It's a couple feet off the ground.
It's a big stage. Yeah.
We're playing. There's some chairs stacked in the corner, and out of nowhere, this guy, he's kind of jumping around, dancing by himself. There's always that one guy just having a party of one in front of the stage. And he decides to run and jump and to stage dive into the pile of chairs. And we're playing. We're looking at it happen. Some of the guys are trying not to laugh as they're singing. And he stands up and he just flicks his hair back and walks out. And we're like, what has happened?
So we played there and we saw that dude, and he did the same kind of crazy stuff. So
Yeah,
it's funny you say that, because I think Traverse City was the weirdest city we ever played in, ever. And I love the place. Yeah. And that club was
So great to go to in the summer or the fall, hit the
Yeah.
wineries, family stuff, go away as a couple for the weekend, just go sightseeing. But it's like, it just didn't connect musically.
Oh, and we had. I mean, you probably did too, because that Union Street's really was the only place to see decent bands, and that place was packed a few times we played there, and we saw some craziness. I mean, yeah, I mean, just absolute craziness from them, not us, them. Like we were staying at like the Park Place or the Holiday Inn right on the water there. Like those nights were easy, but we saw some things, man. I would go Traverse City, Kalamazoo. We played with we played with a band that was like trying to be like Guar in Kalamazoo one night. Yeah, and this was like in '02 or '03. We had just released yesterday, Friday, and today we were playing everywhere. And we were coming in heavy. We had just done the shows with the Gin Blossoms, and like it was wild. I mean, and we're playing like small joints. I can't remember the name of the place now. Small place, rooftop place. Harvey's on the Mall. And like, oh my God, no idea. Weird. And then like years later, we went back there. We did the State Theater with Eddie Money, and it was one of the best shows ever on a Sunday night. I was like, this is gonna be terrible. There's nobody gonna be here. This is gonna be insane. And it was phenomenal. And then Mount Pleasant I always give Mount Pleasant the third, just because we would play Rubbles, and Steve
Oh,
went to college there, right? Like so they would shut the doors at 2 and go, you guys can just keep playing. And we'd be looking at each other like, why? This place is still packed, play. So we think those are crazy. But it's funny you said Traverse City, man, because that was by far the weirdest city we ever played shows in, ever.
yeah, we played around the Midwest, but that one was came to mind. The other one was we tried to cross into Sarnia, Ontario, and we got in, and our bass player became friends with the guys in this band, and they were almost the sound wise of the Counting Crows. We didn't realize how big they were in Canada. Like they were a
Oh,
pretty
God.
big band, and they met him at the Hamlin Pub in Rochester Hills.
Oh, my God.
And he goes, "Guys, I got a show. We're playing in Canada." And they emailed us, going, "Have all your serial numbers, all your gear, use our amps, use our drum set, just bring a snare drum." And we're like, "Okay." So the four of us are in my SUV. We cross over. Our singer is an hour behind us with his girlfriend, has his guitar in the trunk, and we go through customs, and they're like, "Yeah, we've heard the radio ads all week. We've been expecting you guys." I was like,
my
"Oh." So the local rock station in Canada and Port Huron, we're advertising the show. They're like, they look at our paperwork for serial numbers, like, "You guys are all set. Immigration wants to have a chat with you, though." We're like, "Okay." And they wouldn't let us in because we didn't have work permits.
Oh, my, because you're getting paid.
And then they're like, "No, no, we're playing pro bono." The band just said, "Say you're playing pro bono." And I was like, they're like, they have a book of regulations they're opening. And then my guitar player, Chad, and I were reading each other, and the lady's going, "Well, is this a club or a bar?" We're like, "Well, it's a club." And
Oh,
then
my
she
God.
goes, "Are people going to dance?" "Well, if someone decides to stand up and dance, but I can't stop them." And she goes, "Well, it says here." I'm like, so after an hour back and forth, and the other guys in the car are calling the band at the venue saying, "We're stuck at the border. We don't know if we're going to make it." We finally wore her down, and she's like, "Fine, just go." We called our singer and said, "Don't say you're playing a show. Say you're going to the casino." And they let him right in.
Oh, my God. Yeah. Yeah.
And that was
Yeah.
a really
Well,
cool
yeah.
venue. It was like St. Andrews Hall with the balcony, but it went all the way
Yeah.
around behind the stage. So it was
Oh,
really
that's actually
cool.
cool. Like a
Yeah, it was
catwalk kind of
it
thing.
was one of the coolest venues we ever played. Yeah, it was pretty
Love it.
cool.
I took my son and I went to Canada back in Thanksgiving weekend, Black Friday. We went to see Mariana's Trench at Caesar's Windsor, and he's not been to Canada yet, and that was a entertaining experience for him to go into Canada around Thanksgiving to get everybody crossing the border is going to the casino, right? Like it was pretty funny, and that's a place which is funny because when I was a kid, like for everybody that's listening to this thing, like Jay and I could probably walk out of our house now and be in Canada in 24 minutes, right? We'd be across the border in 24 minutes. If we or 22 maybe if we drove fast. I used to go there for dinner sometimes and just go across the barbecue joint or, that jazz club, the old, the Aardvark. We used to go to the Aardvark all the time. And, it was either you're going to the casino or you're going to one of those places. And then now it's going to a concert. Oh, let me see your tickets. Yeah, it's glad you
Yeah,
guys got in because things can get real, real
yeah, it was
hairy at
really
the border,
challenging.
man.
Yeah, I mean, we went and saw Warrant in Windsor, Canada on the Belly to Belly tour, which was like 3 albums after Cherry Pie. It
Oh
was
my
not,
God.
it was kind of the lean years, and it
Yeah.
was not, it was,
It
I
was
mean,
in the dip of the bell curve.
it was,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't even know if it was on the dip. All right, one last question.
Sure.
What is the last show you binge watched? Netflix, Hulu, Apple TV.
We just finished Marvel's got an animated series called Invincible. So my son's going into animation and beauty in particular, and we binge watched that whole thing. And before that, at the same time as that, we watched Shrinking with Jason Segel. Yeah. No, great show. Great show. it's weird. I have a hard time committing to series, man. So those are good to get them, and yeah. They're fun, man. That's and what about you? You on one right now?
We're season 3 of Ted Lasso,
Oh,
which we were late to the game on that.
yeah, I think it's the best show created in the last 20 years.
And we totally are on board. I want to get a believe sign from my home office. And then when we dove into was the studio with Seth Rogen. I thought, oh, give it a
He's
shot.
on that one right now.
Oh
I
my
haven't
God.
seen it yet.
We were in tears on episode 2. We were laughing so hard. I was like, what is this? This is crazy.
Yeah. I have outside of football season, I know we talked about that. That's my window. So I won't binge anything during football season because there's 4 or 5 nights a week of football that I'm probably watching or doing work while I'm watching. As soon as like the Super Bowl's over, we go on benders of catching up on a whole bunch of shows. So we're on What We Do in the Shadows right now, Daredevil, and my wife's on Studio, and I think she's on one other one. We're gonna catch the Owen Wilson one where he's the failed golfer trying to make a comeback.
Yeah.
I forgot what it's called, but we're gonna get on that one now. I was warned yesterday that I either get on that one or she watches it without me, so I gotta get on that one too.
Yeah, it's Mark Maron's in that.
Yeah. And having a 17-year-old right now, you got, there's 3 choices of who wants to watch what at this point.
Same. Our daughter's home from Michigan State for the summer, and our son is just finishing his first year in high school. So between the 3 or 4 of us, some shows he's not into, we have a running debate what it is going to be, a couple nights a week, try to have some time together. And so.
Yeah, that's great, man. That's great.
Well, Frank, this has been great. If you found value in this episode, please like and subscribe and keep rocking HR excellence.